This week on Wednesday, February 11, Iran celebrated its Revolution Day or Independence Day. Iran took its revolution in 1979. It was led by the Ayatollah Khamenei against a Western sponsor leader. In Iran, they call him a Shah, right, which means king. His name was Mohammad Shah Pahlavi. You hear the West today saying that Iran hijacked the revolution. Like what they were planning to do, right? This coup d'etat that they were planning to do in Iran, they call it a revolution. But the real revolution took place in 1979 against the West. In this video, I want to show you the different times in which Iran publicly humiliated the West, specifically the United States. The very first time they humiliated the United States was this revolution itself. An 80 years old man led a revolution against the United States and embarrassed the US, where until today, the consequences of this revolution is still painful for US. See, before the US sponsored or puppet Mohammad Shah took power, his father, his name was Reza Shah Pahlavi, was the leader, right? And he also led a coup d'etat and was sponsored by the West, more specifically the British. The British helped Reza Shah Pahlavi to take power. At the time, he was a military leader. He ousted the king or the Shah who was there before him, and he took power with the help of UK because they didn't want the Shah who was in place to align himself with the Soviet Union. That is how they helped Reza Pahlavi take power in 1929. Now, Reza Pahlavi, during World War II, took a neutral position. He didn't want to, be with the West and the Soviet Union to fight against Hitler, and he also didn't want to be with Hitler. And by doing so, he refused that his country be used to transfer weapons, during World War II. And so the Soviet Union and the UK, their argument was that Reza Pahlavi is going to align himself with Hitler if we don't intervene. So they invaded Iran. They removed him from power in 1941 and installed his son. At the time, his son was 21, and he was educated in the West, more specifically in Switzerland. And his name was Mohammad Shah Pahlavi. Mohammad Shah Pahlavi was very young. He appointed a prime minister, Mossadegh. And this guy, in 1953, wanted to nationalize Iranian's oil. The West did not like that, of course. They asked the Shah to, remove him or whatever, and the guy didn't want to leave power, and the idea was that he was going to remove the Shah. They protected the Shah, flew him out of the country, and then the West came and arrested the guy, right? Got rid of him. The Shah came back and continued the power. He was running Iran with an iron fist. The division between the poor and rich, the gap was extremely big. All this thing about when the West come into your country, they're going to bring, jobs and all of that. Iranian didn't see anything. Suffering was worse during the reign of the puppet of the West, Shah. Not only that when people were protesting, he was killing them, but also he let the West take over every single thing they could take without the Iranians seeing a dime from their natural wealth. And when an 80-year-old man, the Ayatollah Khamenei, who was a religious leader, began to communicate with his people, telling them from overseas, he was expelled because he was, speaking against the Shah. And because he was very public, right, the Shah didn't want to get rid of him. It was going to look very bad. So they sent him to Iraq. He wasn't working, and then they sent him to France. At the time, France was also a major ally of Iran. That comes to tell you how much French was eating from Iran, right? And even from France, where they were supposed to watch him, he led a revolution by recording cassettes and sending them to Iranians, telling them, get on the street and protest. And when one of the protests got worse and they killed people, you would have thought that Iranians were going to, pull back and be scared. No, they flooded the street even more. And when things were pretty bad, the Shah had to flee. This was a major surprise to the West. They were so engulfed into stealing and enriching themselves from the natural resources of Iran that they did not have time to pay attention to the revolution that was taking place slowly in Iran. And that is how in 1979, the Ayatollah Khamenei, an 80-year-old man, humiliated the United States and West as a whole when he landed into his country and took power. And that is when Iran, for the very first time, became independent.
Their precaution was unnecessary. As Khomeini came down the steps, more than 2,000 years of monarchy in Iran came to an end.
The United States, most importantly, has never recovered from this humiliation. The second time that Iran humiliated the United States again was when they took hostages of the diplomats, right? The United States had an embassy. Before the revolution, it was more than 1,000 people in that embassy in Iran. It was a major embassy, right? Now keep in mind, they were eating so much from Iran that, they were just pouring their people there. And when the revolution was taking place, they removed most of them. It was just about less than 100 people that were left. And so the Shah were, trying to go to the United States because when he fled Iran, he had cancer. And the United States thought about it. At the time, Jimmy Carter was the president of the US. And he said, if we take the Shah in the United States, Iran can turn against us. What if they take our diplomat hostages? So the United States refused to take the Shah at first. Then months passed. The Shah requested again because no countries were taking him. See, that's how they treat you. They only with you when they need you. And then once you fall, they act like they never even heard of you. Keep in mind, man, from the 1940s all the way until 1979, the Shah was there for the US and opened his country. But when he got sick and things got worse, they didn't want him in the United States. But you can understand what Jimmy Carter was saying. He feared for the diplomats who were in Iran. And so months passed and they asked Jimmy Carter again, please, right? The Shah is begging. He's sick. He needs help. He has cancer. Finally, Jimmy Carter said, you know what? Let's take him. And that decision right there is what made the students, without the permission of even Ayatollah Khamenei himself, they decided to take hostage American diplomats. And this was never done before. You don't take diplomats hostages. You'd never do that. This was against international law. But they did it anyway. And this was a major embarrassment for the US. Because what would take place is that now the US had to negotiate. Ayatollah Khamenei, being a tough man, right? He took advantage of that situation. They were negotiating, things were taking place. And at one point in time, US always want to double play people. Iraq just declared war against Iran. And Iran knew that the US was behind that. The US said they had nothing to do with it, but we knew they were behind it. In fact, they supported it. They even gave weapons. But they couldn't support it too much because they were also negotiating for the protesters. While they were negotiating, a third major embarrassment took place. Jimmy Carter, they decided that they were going to fly into Iran to save the hostages. So they sent about 8 helicopters, right? The Delta Force, you name them, right? The commandos and the powerful United States soldiers. They planned the whole thing in secret. Nobody knew about it. And so when they finally decided, they're going for it, they flew into a sandstorm. It looks like God was fighting for Iran.
The night of the operation, the 8 helicopters flew into a sandstorm. One turned back, one was abandoned, and a third was grounded at the refueling point. That left 5. But as the Americans prepared to withdraw, failure turned into disaster. A helicopter collided with the refueling aircraft. 8 servicemen died in the crash. It was a human tragedy and, in an election year, a political disaster.
I went on television the next morning, beginning at 6 o'clock, to tell the American people what happened, and it was all my fault. It was my decision to attempt the rescue operation. It was my decision to cancel it when problems developed.
That was Iran again, embarrassing the United States. And the next thing Iran will do is that finally they get an agreement with the United States, and Jimmy Carter's like, yeah, we're finally going to get the hostages out and everything, and the hostages were getting ready to be released. They're sitting on the tarmac inside a plane. Jimmy Carter was going to the inauguration of Ronald Reagan, and Iran purposely waited until Jimmy Carter was no longer president. Then after that, they released the hostages, giving an embarrassment to Jimmy Carter as president.
Roughly 5 minutes after I was no longer president, the Secret Service agent came down and whispered in my ear that the hostages were free.
They had deliberately delayed its release until maybe 20 seconds after Reagan had been sworn in.
Now you understand why the U.S. hate Iran. Matter of fact, there are no time where Iran did not embarrass the United States. Just think about it. Here's Iran, a sanctioned country. It was supposed to be struggling and suffering. But under sanction, they built the most powerful army with hundreds of thousands of ballistic missiles, hypersonic weapons. Iran has some of the most intelligent engineers, to the point where Israel and the United States are spending money just killing their engineers. They're scientists, like they call them. Still, Iran's under sanction became the superpower of the Middle East. There were a time when Obama was in power, right? When he was president of the United States, they sent a drone to Iran to try to surveil, to try to see what Iran is doing. And what Iran did, right, when no one had done before, is to take control of that drone, land that drone safely, and began reverse engineering. Today, Iran has one of the biggest and most powerful drones industry in the planet.
Today, President Obama confirmed what we first reported here last Thursday. The aircraft captured by the Iranians earlier this month is, in fact, one of America's most sophisticated spy planes. The president was asked about it today.
We have asked for it back. We'll see how the Iranians respond.
In Iran, experts have been poring over the drone. Iranian TV claimed today that they've recovered data from the RQ-170 aircraft, and a top Iranian military official says they can now reproduce it, though U.S. experts doubt that.
That is the powerful United States asking that they give them back their drone. This is why Iran celebrated their revolution. They reminded themselves how they became independent. You hear a lot of propaganda in the news, oh, Iranian people are suffering and all of that. Look, it is true that Iran is under sanction. But what Iran has been able to accomplish under sanction, no countries allied with the United States who has never been under sanction can accomplish that. Just think about Saudi Arabia. Think about Qatar. Think about all those countries. Not one of them have the type of scientists or the type of technology that Iran has. Under sanction, you see the humiliation. The West has never brought anything good to anyone. All this preaching about, oh, we want to save the Iranian people and all of that. Let me tell you, people who tell you that is probably because they get paid by the West to tell you that. And the others is because they are ignorant. Most of them probably never even traveled to Iran. But I can tell you one thing. Iran may have some financial problem because they are going under sanction. But Iran is not a country that is suffering. And what is going on in terms of financial situation is only a matter of time. So when you see Netanyahu coming back from the White House, not too happy, is because they remember that Iran is a free country.